The yearly gathering of the Wilson family was just as oppressive as I recalled. In my aunt's enormous home, crystal chandeliers glistened above, reflecting off pricey watches and beautiful gowns. The air was heavy with the strange combination of superiority and pricey perfume that seemed to accompany my relatives everywhere. I watched from the corner as my cousins vied for attention by sharing their most recent successes. I felt protected from their criticism by my understated black outfit, which I had picked out to help me blend in with the surroundings. "Olivia," the voice of my Aunt Patricia broke the commotion. "I nearly missed you there. Are you still employed as a secretary, my love?" I concealed my smile behind the glass as I took a tiny drink of champagne. "Administrative assistant, actually." She raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow. "Still at that little consulting firm. What was it called again?" "Summit Solutions," I replied quietly. My cousin Ethan, fresh from making partner at his father's law firm, couldn't resist joining in. "Come on, Liv. I could get you a real job, something with actual career potential." I thought about the stack of contracts waiting for my signature back at my office, my real office, not the carefully maintained cover I showed the world. "I'm happy where I am, thanks." "Happy?" Aunt Patricia's laugh could have cut glass. "Darling, you're wasting your potential. Your cousins are all executives, partners, real business people, and you're still pushing paper for someone else. If only they knew that someone else was me." The story of how I built my empire in secret started 10 years ago, in this very house. I was fresh out of business school, armed with an MBA and a revolutionary idea for restructuring failing companies. I'd spent months perfecting my pitch, convinced that my family's vast business connections would help launch my career. Instead, they laughed. "Consulting?" Uncle Robert had scoffed. "Leave that to the big firms, girl. Join the family business, start in the mailroom, work your way up like everyone else." Everyone else meant my male cousins, of course. The Wilson family's idea of success was strictly defined and strictly controlled. They built their fortune through a network of companies, each headed by a carefully chosen male heir. Women were expected to marry well or take subordinate positions, nothing more. That night, I made two decisions that would change everything. First, I would build my own company without their help or knowledge. Second, I would make them regret every dismissive word. Summit Solutions began in a tiny office above a Chinese restaurant. My savings covered the rent barely, but I had something more valuable than money. I understood how companies worked, how they failed, and most importantly, how to fix them. My first client was a small manufacturing firm on the verge of bankruptcy. The owner had been turned down by every major consulting firm in the city. I spent 3 months restructuring their operations, streamlining processes, and negotiating with creditors. 6 months later, they were profitable again. Word spread quietly through business circles about the mysterious consulting firm that could save dying companies. I hired carefully, choosing people who shared my vision and my discretion. Every employee signed ironclad NDAs. My name never appeared on any public documents. I was simply the CEO. As Summit Solutions grew, I maintained my cover as a low-level employee. I kept the tiny office above the restaurant, even as we expanded into a sleek downtown headquarters. When family members asked about my job, I described mundane administrative tasks, watching their eyes glaze over with disinterest. The deception wasn't just about pride, it was strategy. The Wilson family's business empire was built on acquiring struggling companies at rock-bottom prices. My firm's specialty was saving those same companies before they became vulnerable to hostile takeovers. We worked in the shadows, quietly thwarting my family's predatory practices while building our own success. Now, 10 years later, Summit Solutions was one of the most influential consulting firms in the industry. We had offices in 12 cities, a client list that included Fortune 500 companies, and a reputation for turning failing businesses into success stories. and not one of my smirking relatives had any idea. More champagne, dear? Aunt Patricia's voice yanked me back to the present. Though perhaps you should stick to water. I imagine your salary doesn't leave much room for expensive tastes. I accepted the champagne with a practiced smile. Thank you, Aunt Patricia. How's Uncle Robert's new acquisition going? Williams Manufacturing, wasn't it? Her smile faltered slightly. There have been some complications. Nothing Robert can't handle, of course. What she didn't know was that those complications were my doing. Williams Manufacturing had been a target of my uncle's hostile takeover attempt. They'd reached out to Summit Solutions 3 months ago, desperate for help. Now they were implementing our restructuring plan. Their stock price was rising, and Uncle Robert's attempt to seize control was falling apart. Either they hired some consulting firm, my cousin Ethan added, probably throwing good money after bad. Those consultants are all the same big promises, no results. I hid another smile. Summit Solutions' fee for saving Williams Manufacturing was more than Ethan would make in 5 years at his father's firm. Oh, which firm? Summit something. He waved dismissively. Nobody important. Dad says their CEO won't even show their face. Probably some trust fund kid playing at business. My phone buzzed in my clutch, a message from my actual assistant. Emergency meeting tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. Wilson Ventures representatives requesting merger discussion Williams Manufacturing. Urgent response needed. I scanned the message twice, realization dawning. They were finally admitting defeat. After failing to acquire the company, they were now seeking a merger which would require approval from Williams' consulting firm. My firm. Tomorrow morning, my family would walk into a meeting expecting to strong-arm their way into a merger. Instead, they would find themselves facing the secretary they dismissed for the past decade. Except I wouldn't be bringing coffee. I would be sitting at the head of the table. Everything all right, dear? Aunt Patricia asked, noticing my expression. I finished my champagne and gave her my brightest smile. Perfect, actually. I should head home early meeting tomorrow. Oh, taking notes for someone important. Something like that, I replied, already planning what I would wear. Something exactly like that. The next morning, I stood in my private elevator, ascending to Summit Solutions' executive floor. Gone was the simple black dress from last night's reunion. Today, I wore a tailored channel suit in deep navy, a power color for a power move. My assistant, Maya, waited at the elevator doors with a tablet and a knowing smile. The Wilson Ventures team arrived early, she reported as we walked. Your uncle seems particularly anxious to meet Summit's CDO. I'm sure he is. I checked my reflection in a glass wall. Perfect. Are they in the main conference room? Yes, along with Mr. Harrison from Williams Manufacturing. Maya's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Your cousin Ethan is there too, apparently. He insisted on handling the legal aspects personally. I smiled, remembering Ethan's condescending offer of a real job just yesterday. Who else from the family? Your Aunt Patricia came as moral support, though she's not officially part of the meeting. And your cousin James, he's representing Wilson Ventures' finance department. A perfect audience. I checked my watch. 8:57 a.m. Have they been offered coffee? Your aunt complained that there was no one to serve it, Maya said, grinning. I told them the administrative assistant would be in shortly. I almost laughed. For 10 years, I played the role of invisible support staff. Whenever family members visited the office, they never looked closely at the quiet woman who brought their coffee or took their coats. It had been the perfect cover. Give me 2 minutes, I said. Then bring in the contracts. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the conference room doors open. Silence. I walked calmly to the head of the table and sat down. You have been, I said, enjoying their confusion. I am the CDO of Summit Solutions. I have been since I founded the company 10 years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. James dropped his pen. Aunt Patricia's perfectly maintained composure cracked. Uncle Robert recovered first, his face reddening. "This is absurd. You're a secretary." "No," I said calmly. "That was a cover, a very effective one, apparently, since none of you ever looked past it. You were so convinced I couldn't be successful that you never noticed I already was." Maya chose that moment to enter with a stack of contracts. She distributed them efficiently, then took her place standing behind my chair. "These documents," I continued, "outline the terms under which Summit Solutions will consider approving the merger between Wilson Ventures and Williams Manufacturing." "Consider approving?" Ethan sputtered. "You can't be serious. This is a joke, right? Some kind of elaborate prank." I pulled out my phone and projected Summit's latest financial statements onto the wall screen. Summit Solutions currently manages over $122 billion in client assets. We have a 94% success rate in corporate restructuring, and our approval is required for any major changes to Williams Manufacturing's business structure. I smiled at my stunned relatives. "Does that look like a joke to you?" "This is impossible," Aunt Patricia whispered. "You're nothing. You've always been nothing." "That's exactly what you were meant to think." I turned to Mr. Harrison. "Would you like to explain to my family why you chose Summit Solutions over Wilson Ventures' original offer?" Mr. Harrison straightened in his chair. "Summit's reputation is unparalleled. When Wilson Ventures attempted their hostile takeover, Summit's restructuring plan saved our company. We've increased profits by 47% since implementing their strategies." James looked like he might faint. "The plan that destroyed our acquisition attempt, that was you." "Among others," I said, listing cases on my fingers. "Peterson Electronics, which you tried to acquire last year. Maritime Shipping, which you underbid on last quarter. The Davidson Group, which mysteriously recovered just before you could buy them out." I leaned forward. "For 10 years, I've been quietly undermining every predatory acquisition your company has made." Uncle Robert's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "You deliberately sabotaged the family business?" "No," I corrected. "I built my own business, one that helps companies survive instead of devouring them for parts. The fact that it interfered with your plans was just a karmic bonus." "This is ridiculous," Ethan declared, standing up. "I'm calling our lawyers." "Sit down, Ethan." My voice carried an authority that made him freeze. "You really should read those contracts in front of you, the ones your firm spent months trying to secure for this meeting." I watched realization dawn on his face. "That's right. Your law firm's biggest client this year? That was me too." Maya stepped forward with another document. "This is a summary of Summit's current market position and liquid assets. You'll note that we're now in a position to acquire controlling interest in Wilson Ventures if we choose." The room erupted in chaos. Aunt Patricia was practically hyperventilating. James was frantically checking the numbers on his phone. Ethan had collapsed back into his chair, looking shell-shocked. "This is blackmail," Uncle Robert growled. "No," I said quietly. "This is business, the kind you taught me I'd never be capable of handling." I stood up, smoothing my jacket. "You have until 5:00 p.m. today to review the merger terms. They're very generous considering our position. If you decline, Summit Solutions will begin purchasing Wilson Ventures stock on the open market tomorrow morning." I headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Aunt Patricia, that champagne you so graciously offered me last night, I own the vineyard that produces it. Bought it last year. The coffee you were so desperate for this morning, that chain too." I smiled sweetly. Turns out my salary does leave room for expensive tastes after all. The door closed behind me on their stunned faces. In my private office, I finally allowed myself a moment to process what had just happened. 10 years of careful deception, of playing the invisible underachiever, had led to this moment. Maya appeared with a real cup of coffee, my favorite blend, from my own coffee chain. Was it worth the wait? I thought about all the times I'd served coffee in this very office, watching my family dismiss me, underestimate me, write me off as nothing more than a secretary. Every single second. My phone buzzed, messages already pouring in from family members who must have heard about the meeting. I silenced it without looking. They'd have plenty of time to process their new reality. Right now, I had an empire to run. And for the first time in 10 years, I could finally do it without hiding who I really was. The next 48 hours were exactly what you'd expect when a family built on power and appearances suddenly discovers they're not at the top of the food chain anymore. The messages started pouring in almost immediately after the meeting. Aunt Patricia. Darling, let's discuss this over lunch. You always were my favorite niece. Ethan. Come on, Liv. We were just joking around. Family should stick together. James. You can't do this to us. We're blood. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the rapid-fire emails from Wilson Ventures board members. They weren't stupid. They could see which way the wind was blowing. By noon, they had scheduled an emergency board meeting. By 3, they had voted to accept Summit's merger terms. Uncle Robert, predictably, didn't go quietly. You've betrayed this family. His voice echoed through my office as he barged in unannounced. Maya moved to intervene, but I waved her off. Let him have his moment. Actually, I said, not looking up from my computer, I'd say I learned from this family. Isn't this exactly what you taught us? Seize power, eliminate competition, never show weakness. We gave you everything. That made me laugh. You gave me nothing less than nothing. You taught me that I would never be good enough, that my only value was in supporting the men in the family. So I built something better. By deceiving everyone for a decade, I finally looked up at him. By letting you deceive yourselves. You saw exactly what you expected to see: a quiet, unambitious woman who knew her place. That was your mistake, not mine. The fight seemed to drain out of him suddenly. He sank into one of my visitor chairs, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Why reveal yourself now? You could have continued operating in secret. Because it was time. I closed my laptop. Williams Manufacturing isn't the only company you're trying to acquire. There's Thomson Electronics, Maritime Solutions, at least 3 others. Companies with good people, solid products that just need help restructuring. I'm tired of watching you destroy them. It's business, he protested weakly. No, it's greed, and it stops now. I handed him a folder. These are the final merger terms. Summit Solutions will acquire a controlling interest in Wilson Ventures. We'll restructure the company to focus on building businesses up, not tearing them down. You can stay on as a consultant if you accept the new direction. If not, your golden parachute is outlined on page 3. He opened the folder with trembling hands. You thought of everything. I learned from the best, I said, smiling without warmth, though not in the way you intended. After he left, Maya brought in a stack of newspapers. Summit's revelation was already making headlines. Secret CEO revealed how one woman built a billion-dollar empire in secret. Wilson family shocked. The hidden success story they never saw coming. My phone buzzed again this time, a message that actually mattered. My mother, who had divorced Uncle Robert's brother years ago and distanced herself from the Wilson family's toxicity, had sent a single line. I always knew you would show them. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. Wilson Ventures board enthusiastically embraced Summit's new direction. Their stock price jumped 40% on the announcement of the merger. Companies that had feared the Wilson name now sought partnerships. The press couldn't get enough of the story. Aunt Patricia tried to spin it as a heartwarming family success story. We always knew Olivia had potential, she told one reporter. This just proves that the Wilson spirit of entrepreneurship runs in the blood. I responded by releasing archived video of last year's family reunion. where she had spent 20 minutes explaining to everyone why I would never amount to anything. The footage went viral. She stopped giving interviews after that. Ethan attempted damage control in his own way, claiming he had been in on it all along. Unfortunately for him, too many people had witnessed his shocked face in that conference room. His law firm's other clients began questioning his judgment. Within a month, he was quietly asked to take a leave of absence. James adapted the fastest, approaching me with a business proposal just 2 weeks after the revelation. We could dominate the market together, he suggested over an awkward lunch. The Wilson Summit Alliance would be unstoppable. That's not what Summit Solutions is about, I told him. We don't dominate, we elevate. The real changes came in the quieter moments, the young intern who tearfully thanked me for showing her that success didn't require compromising her principles. The female executives who started reaching out, sharing their own stories of being underestimated. The business schools that invited me to speak about building ethical success in a corrupt world. 3 months after the revelation, I stood on a stage accepting the Business Innovation Award. Looking out at the audience, I saw my mother sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. Behind her sat several of my former administrative assistants, all women who had helped maintain my cover while building their own careers within Summit. Success isn't about who has the most power, I told the crowd. It's about how you use the power you have. For 10 years, I played a role that made powerful people underestimate me. I could have revealed myself sooner, but I chose to wait until Summit Solutions was strong enough to create real change. The applause was thunderous, but the real satisfaction came later that evening. I was working late in my office when Maya brought in an interesting piece of news. Uncle Robert has just announced his retirement, she said. His resignation letter included an unexpected paragraph. My niece taught me that true business success isn't measured in acquisitions or assets, but in the positive impact we create. I regret that it took losing control of my company to learn this lesson. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about the long game I had played. 10 years of careful planning, of swallowing pride and playing small, had led to this moment. Summit Solutions wasn't just successful, it was changing how business was done. The next family reunion would certainly be interesting. I planned to host it myself in Summit's main conference room, the same room where I had served coffee countless times, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to show them who I really was. Maya knocked on my door. Your 4 p.m. is here, the CEO of Thomson Electronics, the company your uncle was trying to acquire. I smiled. Show them in. And Maya, bring coffee for everyone, the good stuff from our chain. As I stood to greet my visitors, I caught my reflection in the window. No more hiding. No more playing small. I had built something remarkable, not despite my family's dismissal, but because of it. They had taught me that power doesn't always look like what people expect. Sometimes it looks like a quiet woman in a simple black dress, serving coffee and taking notes, while building an empire right under everyone's nose. The tabloids referred to it as retaliation. It was described as strategic genius in the business press. Simply put, though, it was justice served one corporate takeover at a time along with a well-made cup of coffee. And my old workstation still remains someplace in a little office above a Chinese restaurant. I retain it as a reminder that being successful doesn't necessarily require attention or fancy clothes. Sometimes, while everyone else is oblivious, it quietly and carefully creates something remarkable. The power you develop when no one is looking is the true key to success, not the strength you display.